Welcome back everyone, MTG Joe here, and I thought today what we can do is a intro explanation video on what is Brawl, how to play it on MTG Arena, and what the difference is between Standard and the historic Brawl. So Brawl is basically the Arena version of EDH or Commander. Normal Brawl is 60 cards, that's Standard legal only cards. However, Historic Brawl is basically all the cards that are allowed on Arena with a small ban list. And Historic Brawl is 100 cards, the same as would be a Commander game. You choose your legendary creature. In Brawl, you're also able to choose Planeswalkers as your legendary spell. And you start at 25 life each, and you get one free mulligan, and you go one-on-one, so it's not a multiplayer game. So I wanted to kind of just navigate you through. So right now, there is an event for the next week or so, and then they're going to be making this a permanent queue. If you do the event and you get one win, you get 3,000 XPs, which is good for 3 levels on the mastery tree, so you can get some packs, stuff like that. But if you want to build a deck, and you want to build a Brawl deck, what you would do is select, you go specifically to 100 card Historic Brawl, and then it'll pick up all the potential creatures you can play. So you can choose based on color pairs, if you want to do multicolor, whatever it may be. Now, one important thing I wanted to note for folks, the way you're only allowed to play cards that share a color identity. So as an example, if you play Teferi, you could only play blue, white, and colorless cards in your deck. Now, if you were to play something like Golos, or Cody, or even Joda Archmage Eternal. So this one's a good example. Joda is blue, red, white. However, the card does have additional color text in its box. So you have the 5 colors. So this is actually a 5-color legendary. So you can play one of each colors. Now, going more colors lets you have a bigger variety of cards, but it also means a more expensive mana base, a more painful mana base, potentially a more clumsy mana base. So it's always kind of the bend that you would do. So say, hypothetically, we want to go with Vega the Watcher. You select, and then it auto-filters all the cards you're allowed to play with. And then, from there, what you want to do is, when you select a card, it's going to default you to 34 lands. I would suggest go in these decks, you want between 37 and 40 lands consistently to hit your land drops, in addition to your ramp sources and stuff like that. It's very important in these types of formats to hit mana consistently. So, wanted to just kind of highlight some things. When you choose a commander, there is a tier list. So what they do is they kind of, based on the strength of the commander you choose, they place you in a kind of similar buckets. So we'll call this the try-hard, spike, in it to win it, like the most tuned kind of decks. And what we have for the most part, they haven't given us an extensive list, but these are pretty much the commanders there. You have Golos, Tireless Pilgrim. Basically this card tutors for lands, lets you cast a bunch of stuff for free. You have Baral, which is counterspell tribal for the most part. You have Essica, God of the Tree, and mostly this is played for the backside, the Prismatic Bridge, which lets you cast Planeswalkers and creatures for free each turn. You have Omnath, Locus of Creation, just a huge mana value, big spells, stuff like that. You have Winota, Joiner of Forces, which is a very low-to-the-ground aggro deck that could cheat creatures into play for combo kills. Teferi Hero Dominaria, control.deck, blue-white control. And then Nicol Bolas, Dragon God. Again, more akin to a control deck. You sometimes will also have Nicol Bolas the Ravager, or 7-mana Nicol Bolas. God Pharaoh also puts you into this top-tier list. So if you want to play a more casual format, play against a bit more brews, or if you're newer and you don't have a lot of cards, you're still learning the format, I would generally suggest avoiding some of these commanders, just because you're going to be playing against very optimized lists more often than not. So, jumping in. So what are some of the must-haves? So obviously, Brawl in every other deck, like all the decks I play for Brawl, they're decks I like to have fun with, so there's cards I like to have fun with. Even my like spiky decks, my Golos deck is basically all the cards I like to play thrown into a deck, so they're kind of more janky style cards, just it happens to be in Golos, so I could cheat them out for free. But really, these are some cards you should consider crafting. They go into a lot of decks, and they're basically going to be your mana structure ramp that goes in pretty much everything. Once you start going to specific colors, then there's certain spells and stuff like that, and we can highlight some of those. But really, just off the bat, Arcane Signet, it's a common. This is 2 mana, and it adds any color to your mana base based on your commander's color identity. So it's 2 mana rainbow artifact. Coldsteel Heart, 2 mana, comes into play tapped. You choose a color, but it's another color source, early mana ramp. So typically mana ramp is dedicated in green based. So you have stuff like Llanowar Elf, stuff like that, which you would also play in those decks. But for the non-green decks, these are great ways to get ahead on mana. You have Mind Stone, which is card draw late or early ramp early. Chromatic Lantern does a great job, especially for budget mana bases. If you're playing a lot of basics in a multicolor deck, 3 mana, taps for any color, and all your lands tap for whatever color you want. There's Replicating Ring, so similar idea. So 3 mana, taps for any color, and then at the beginning of your upkeep, you get to put a counter on it. Once it reaches 8 counters, you get to make 8 copies of Replicating Ring. So early game ramp into big like mana late game. Solemn Simulacrum, another card. If you are playing in like a non-green deck, you want some ramp in like the mid game. This searches up any basic in your deck, as well as when it dies, you get to draw a card. And then there's Command Tower. Again, a common. This card will add any color. It's a rainbow untapped land, which is fantastic in these types of shells. You have Field of Ruin. So Field of Ruin, the reason that I would suggest playing this, if you can, if you're not in like 4 or 5 color decks, a lot of decks are playing Field of the Dead. And this is a card that if you're playing a 2 color, maybe, depending on how you set up your mana base, how many lands you have, but 3+ color decks, this is pretty much a free card that just, once you hit 7 lands, you just start pumping out zombies every time you hit a land drop. So it's a creature for every land drop. So being able to Field of Ruin your opponents or your opponent's utility lands is very impactful in the mid to late game. And if you are going to be playing Field of the Dead, one thing I would suggest with your basics, do a split of your basics between regular basics and snow-covered basics. They still count for basic lands. You can still search for them in the same manner you would with a Cultivate style effect, or like search your library for a basic land. But what this does is it counts as 2 separate land types for the Field of the Dead. So that way you can get around having too many basics to not trigger your Field of the Dead. Outside of that, when you are building for specific colors, there really is up to you. The world's your oyster. I have a lot of decks featured in my Brawl playlist that you can check out for ideas. If you don't have cards, you can substitute in stuff you like. You can always drop questions, what I would say. The only thing I would say is within green, for ramp, a couple cards you want to always play is Into the North. So this is 2 mana, search for any snow basic, but you can also get your duels, so you can search up like any of these as well. So this is kind of utility in that space. You have stuff like Explore, Llanowar Elf, so just there's a bunch of kind of cards like that you'd want. Even kind of off the beaten path card, if you're in green, a creature deck, Guardian Project. Every creature in your deck is going to be a unique name, so you get the card draw every time you cast a creature. So that's kind of value that way. There's a lot of like these kind of niche cards, and that's really when you're going to start exploring. So build around themes, play around, slot in decks, and then I can show you what a completed deck would look like. So we can look at a couple decks. So this is my Trilasara. This is a deck that's built around life game synergies. So it's a green-white deck. So you'll notice here my curve is pretty low on this one. This one's a more aggressively slanted deck. So we have a bunch of 1 and 2 drops, and then we have a bunch of life gain synergies, and then we kind of top out here. Now, if we compare this is like really creature heavy, 1 drop, 2 drop creatures. If we compare something to like Tiamat, this is 5 color dragons. So you can notice my 1 drop is 1 card here. My 2 drop slot is pretty much every 2 drop ramp I could come up with. Just like a bunch of ramp spells, stuff like that. Don't be afraid to use these module lands. So this is both a land and a creature if needed. We have stuff like Cultivate here, very useful card to get you ahead on mana. Again, like I'm playing the Chromatic Lantern, the Replicating Ring. And in this deck, so we're trying to do a bunch of ramp into these big dragons on the top end. So this one's probably a little bit more. You can see with this deck here, we're using a 5-color mana base, which tends to be a lot more expensive. This deck, I think, has 50 rares and like 20 mythics. And then we can look at something like mid. This is a control deck that's like built around stealing stuff. So this one's got probably a more even distribution of across the board. And this one's got like more removal, card draw, and like stealing effects. Again, this is a 2-color mana base, so not as many rare lands, but you could even see that this is a good example. I have Field of the Dead over here, and we're able to turn on Field of the Dead through a bunch of just these dual style lands. There's so many like multicolored dual lands that it's pretty easy between the split to get all these different land types. So you might not get it exactly as your 7th land, but in this deck, we don't have a way to tutor up Field of the Dead. So it's more of just a natural bonus that we would get. And then finally, this is just another example. And you can go crazy. Like I said, this is a creature deck. And you can see we're very heavy on 2-drops, 3-drops. This is around ramp and stuff like that. But give it a shot. Let me know if you think there are any other cards that are must craft. Drop it in a comment. If you've experienced any other decks getting you slotted into the top tier list. If you have any questions in general, I want to build this deck. What would you suggest putting in? Or if you have a deck list and you want run it by me, I can take a look hopefully and offer you some feedback. But for the most part, Brawl is about fun. If you're not enjoying the game, it's a free queue. You can concede. You can move on to the next one. But it's most importantly about you having fun, experimenting with different decks, strategies. I've put together a ton of different Brawl decks, and I have a great time with it. So anyways, if you do enjoy this content, make sure to hit that subscribe button. It's free to do so and lets you know when we go live with any videos. If you want to catch gameplay to see how various Brawl decks play out that you've seen on this, I have them all up on my YouTube channel in the Brawl playlist, so you can take a look there as well. Appreciate you stopping by as always, and we will catch you next time. Thanks for watching.